What's up, bookworms? This is Megan coming at you with another Cantina conversation. Today's episode features a chat with Alden Jones. We're talking about her collection of short stories called Edge of the World. That book is available now. I really enjoyed hearing about Alden's experiences putting this collection together, from reaching out to writers and putting everything together and being strategic about all that. Either way, I'll let you guys get to it. Here is Alden. So today we've got Alden Jones. We're talking about Edge of the World. That is a collection of short stories that's available on May 6th. Alden, thanks for joining me today. I'm almost done. I just got a few more stories left to read, but I'm really enjoying everything so far, and just the stories you picked and the powerful voices, and just a lot of stories that make you think. At least for me, as a cis white female, experiences that are very different. So I'm excited to chat a little bit more about it today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So to get started, can you share like a summary of the collection or maybe of the project, how you brought it out into the world, stuff like that?
Sure. So I first had the idea when I was at a cocktail party in 2016 for a travel editor his name is Rafi Kadushin, who was the acquiring editor for my first book. And he was a travel writer full time in addition to being an acquiring editor. Just from his personal taste, he'd acquired a lot of, and he was gay. He is still, as far as I know. And he'd acquired a unique gay travel list. There was nothing like that until he made it. I think editors thought it was too niche. It's like too specific. So Rafi had put together I think he edited two of them and he solicited others, but they were all divided between gay and lesbian. And I was like, why isn't there one that's all queer people? Because like when you start getting down to the super specific subgroups, it gets more narrow in scope. So I was, let's make the scope wider and see what kinds of themes arise. And so I started soliciting. First, I thought about writers I wanted to include, and pretty much everyone said yes, except people who were too busy. But
Yeah.
everyone was very excited about the project and had a lot of people write new work, and two people whose work I'd read, Edmund White and Alexander Chee. I'd seen pieces that they'd written and published elsewhere in The Guardian and The New York Times. And so I asked them if I could reprint those. And then there are a couple people who I hadn't met before, a couple former students whose work I've followed for a long time. So I was hoping to get as much of a range as I could. And I was really happy with the way it turned out. Although I think I was really worried it was going to be too light. So I started soliciting more heavy themes. And then I worried it was too heavy. So that was a little bit of a balance. Trying to strike the right tone between this is the reality. Like when you're queer and you're traveling in certain places, it's not easy in all these different ways. So that reality I wanted to make sure was communicated. But then it's also nice to have fun. And travel writing is historically, there's the pleasure and leisure. You don't want to lean on that too hard because that's what travel writing has mostly been. But you still want to include some of that and have the queer joy element of it.
Yeah, I thought it was so interesting because obviously travel writers, it is niche because they're going to all these places, and I guess when I think of travel writing, I think of like more nonfiction,
Mhm.
more like creative nonfiction. But like the collections, I haven't read a whole lot of travel writing. So that's why I had a very little familiarity or assumption of it. So when I started reading these, like, oh, like I loved how it became a little more personal. And I think that's because of the nature of they were part of that community, because they had to add that personal flair to really talk about their circumstance. Okay, hey, we're minding our own business, mind your own kind of thing.
That's also what literature is for, right? Like
Yeah,
it's to experience someone else's life who's not
exactly.
like you. So
Hmm.
while I really wanted to capture what is specific about being queer while traveling, I also really wanted it to speak to the universal like thoughts, values, and what it means to be human. I've been a travel writer for a long time. I started in the 90s when you could still make money as a travel writer and trained myself in how to write a typical travel essay, but it was so uniform. It was so constrained. And I wrote a travel essay that did well, and I had a few editors interested in, like, do you have a book? And they wanted Under the Tuscan Sun or Building My Dream House in Mexico, and I was like, but I've never built a dream house. I don't really, I don't have that story. So I really like what else you could do with the travel essay. Like, how can you make it? How can you expand the genre? And how can queerness help to do that? Help to look at how we've traditionally looked at travel essays or travel writing as, mainly about vacation, pleasure, leisure, escape. But what about going home? What about traveling? There's one essay that's basically about a car ride. So, like, what is travel and what matters in travel writing? So, hopefully, there is that universality and that using form to encourage readers to see these ideas in different ways.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I like that sentiment, like using the method to help spread the message. And cuz I'm thinking like cuz I took notes on every single story in
Oh,
here,
good.
and I thought it was like really interesting because you come out strong here. This is get ready. Even though you did put in like your forward notes or whatever, like
Mhm.
your author's note. It's like, "Hey, buckle up" kind of thing.
Yeah, I put that essay first because it's
Yeah.
by Andrew Ellis Evans, and he's a prolific travel writer. He was a National Geographic staff writer for a long time, and I met him because he just written a book about traveling almost entirely ground travel from Washington D.C. to Antarctica. He obviously had to take a boat
Mm,
for that last part, but and I did some readings with him, and we just had such a good time. And he's just been everywhere. And so when I asked him, I was like, write whatever you want. And it was such a whirlwind tour. And I was like, that's a great way to start the book. It is travel
yeah.
and leisure, but I mean, travel, pleasure and leisure, but it is also on this whirlwind tour with the man who would become my husband. There were conflicts along the way. Like, you try to get a hotel room and they see that it's two men and they're like, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. We have a matrimonial bed. So what do you say that in English? It's a double bed. So
Yeah.
they would push the beds apart and they'd be like, what do we tell them? Should we tell them that we don't want the beds pushed apart? And then, so that could be like the little conflict that I think most of us have experienced. Like, everyone who travels with a same sex partner gets the confusion at the desk. I think also one thing that only came up when I wrote the intro that I realized was something I wished I had more of in the anthology, but at least I got to mention it on a personal level in the intro, was how much it changed when I was traveling with a female partner. It was just the two of us. We were viewed mainly as besties, like good
Mm,
friends. And people would sometimes ask us, like, are you sisters? But then when I got married and had kids and we started traveling with kids, people were much more confused and
mm.
much more like trying to figure us out. And we could tell not too sure about how to ask the question. But sometimes we did get asked point blank, what's going on here? So it was interesting how kids really changed the way
Yeah.
people tried to figure you out.
'Cause then I guess, like, kids, like, people see it or as a solidified, like, family unit and versus an ambiguous companionship. It's funny to flip it on the other side. It's if you have platonic, um, opposite sex people traveling together or
Mhm.
doing things together, and people think that you're in a
Exactly.
relationship, and I've had a couple of my best friends in college. I'm still really close to them, but they're, like, married. We all have married and kids. There were two guys, and I spent, like, a lot of time with them because we were all single at the time. But I just remember one was like, "Hey, I you wanna be my date to this wedding? I don't have anybody else to go with," and
Mhm.
it's but people would ask whether or not
What's
however
your
long,
deal? Yeah.
yeah, exactly, and it's funny to kinda juxtapose that with that, like, on the flip side of it, just be like, "Wait a second, you are together, but we don't assume you're together." It's okay, you are not together, but we're assuming you're together. There must be something there. You're not taking her to as a date to your wedding as just a friend. No,
Right.
that Matt, he's, "You know what? I think likewise, Megan. I think so." I think and it was like, no offense, it was just like, that's just the reality of, like, human relationships, but once you bring it out, once you, like, once you have people outside the frame, and that's the only way that I can, like, maybe relate to that, but it's so different, especially if you're people who are traveling to an unaccepting country or a country where it's criminalized,
Mhm.
and that could be super scary. I read also included that where it was like, "Oh, you can't talk about that here," or "You can't" you could be thrown in jail, like,
Mhm.
'cause they're not accepting, and it's heartbreaking because gay people time on adventures with their loved ones, and it's sad that some places just aren't welcoming and are
Mhm.
safe, or they have to or they have there's like an underground communication system where it's some of them like, "Oh, where are the spots? Where
Yeah.
are our people?"
Which
No.
is actually one of the things that I think makes international travel really fun,
Yeah.
because you always have that kind of the track. Actually, one year was in the early 2000s, so it was before the complete onslaught of travel blogs and everything. So Curve magazine, which was like the lesbian lifestyle magazine, which sadly folded, they had a travel issue every year. And I was about to go to Ireland with my girlfriend at the time, and they had spotlight on Ireland. And so they had just put together this very random itinerary. It was like, this part, go to this part of the country and see some really good music in this little pub, and then travel far from there, go to Galway and go to this lesbian inn that it's run by lesbians, and then go to Dublin and go here. And everywhere we went, there were lesbians holding Curve magazine. So we had all brought this magazine and we're on the same trail. And it was so fun. It was like we had so many people to hang out with and talk to,
Yeah.
and we didn't even have to
Hey.
try. So that's, I've always sought out those queer spaces. And as I wrote in the intro, Costa Rica was it was such an important part of my time there, because I was a teacher in a very small town and my life was very conservative, and I'd wear long skirts and that kind of thing. And then I would go for the weekend with my friends and meet up with people, Costa Rican and American friends who lived closer to the city, and would get my fill of the gay life and feel like I had my community. And it was very international. And then I could go back to my town and feel like, yeah, I'm myself here in one way and I'm myself there in another way. But I think I really needed that to function here.
Yeah, it's just for lack of better words, it's a sense of community, and it's definitely different energy, like, that there versus here, absolutely 100%. Like, even though I'm not part of the community, like, I've it's funny traveling just in general, but I remember 2 of my husband's groomsmen were gay. We do our best to keep in touch with them. It's hard as we get older, obviously, but it's we traveled to the DC area to visit a friend, and I remember we spent one a night. It was like me and my husband and then 2 of our friends, 1 straight and then 1 gay, and we were all, like, all out just, like, enjoying the night out, enjoying, like, walking around, exploring the area, and then we, like, found this random, like, club that was, like, downstairs underneath the store, but it was funny because we heard the music, and then we saw people coming up, and we're like, "Oh, is that where the party is?" And there's
Mhm.
somebody, like, on the bench, they're like, "Yeah, that's where the party
Yeah.
is." And we go there, and it's already, like, 11 o'clock, and it's, like, pushing 1 o'clock by the one time we're like, "Okay, like, I think are you ready to go?" And a gay friend is, "Can we stay a little bit longer? I'll buy you another round. I'll buy you another round." And it just kinda reminded me of every time I went out with him or went out with that group of people, they don't stop, or, like, they start at 11, and I'm
Yeah.
just thinking like that. I don't wanna be
Nice.
like, "Oh, that's a gay thing," but I think it is. It's like,
It's a
they're
gay
just like,
youth
"Oh."
thing. Yeah.
I was gonna say, yeah, we're still, like, in our 30s, but yeah, like,
I
yeah,
can't do
it's
it
no, but
anymore.
it's funny. I know, I can't if I had a 4-hour nap at dinner
Right.
time, then maybe I could be ready to start the night. But I know it's, like, after a certain age, but no, that stuff like that just gets me thinking, like, you find your people and you find that community, and it's as long just from, like, my experiences, like, on a night out, for example, or traveling, for example, it's things like that where it's just, like, really funny where I think I had, like, another friend who was, "Oh, man." Sh It was a little bit of a culture shock where she was, "I didn't know they threw down like that." I'm like, I forgot too." But it just yeah, it is like a different vibe and it's a different energy, and it just made me appreciate that much more because it's not just the people, these stories, they're not, like, out just they are having fun, they are doing it leisurely, but they're also there just, like, trying to live their life. They're not you're trying to disrupt the peace, they're not trying to be wild. They're just visiting their family, or they have to do it either out of necessity or out of, like, obligation or out of a desire, and it's a different experience either way, and it's even, like, the shorter stories, I think where one was, like, transgender
Mhm.
person, and I think it was I feel so bad, I think it
Then
was a
Michelle
teenage.
Norris.
Yeah, so maybe yeah. Hold on, I have them all written down. Um,
Nicole, actually, all 3 are of the
it
Black
might have been
authors are
yeah, no, you're right, how you have these off of the top of your head, yeah, those are women, Mother's Day.
yeah, that's Den Michelle Norris.
Visiting their mother, yeah, she was visiting her mother and just take go a rest stop. having to use a bath.
Such a simple thing.
Yeah. I'm like it was one of those, like, slower paced ones, but it was like, there was still, like, stuff to think another thing that I just don't have to think about, to worry about, and it makes me appreciate it that much more with something as simple as going to the bathroom and they're like, they already she already had known the drill, already had that kind of anticipation,
Mhm.
and it just does become second nature, and it shouldn't I find it fascinating how different these things, like, they have to worry about without even it's second nature to them to have to keep those things in mind and have to
Mhm.
protect themselves just from
Just do a simple task that
yeah,
everyone takes for granted.
exactly, exactly, it's when I hear I thought, I'm like, "Ah, I can't pee standing up."
Mm.
I'm gonna complain about that when it's there are women who, like, have to worry about peeing in general, and it's yeah, it's just things like that where it's just made me appreciate these stories so much more. So, how when, like hopping off of that a little bit, how did you structure these stories? Did you have an idea of how you wanted to like, how you wanted to place them, and at what point as a reader might progress through those stories? Like, the did you have a plan for that, or,
That was
were you,
actually
"Oh, I'm gonna figure this out as we go along," like,
yeah, that
stuff
was the
like that?
hardest part of the process because
Okay.
I had solicited what I was gonna get. There were a couple that didn't work out, and I had to replace them last minute, but that wound up being great. Like, the things I got last minute were wonderful, so I was really happy with the way it turned out, but I was getting them here and there, like, I didn't get everything at once, and so I just my assistant and I just had them laid across the table, and we just kept rearranging them, but it was really hard to decide. You don't know what you're going to get. So you don't know if you're going to get three of the same kind of story and you have to make sure they
Yeah.
don't wind up in the same spot. I realized afterwards that I put two essays next to each other that both of them have a girlfriend named Kate. And I was like, I
Oh.
really should have split those apart so that didn't confuse readers. But there were some interesting, I call them doubles. It was like there was the same exact quote in one of the essays that I don't think you've gotten to yet, and one of the essays in the middle about queer utopia and certain things that just kept repeating. So it was really interesting to see what those things were. A lot of them were about dealing with parents. So yeah, I wanted to invite the reader in the beginning. I didn't want to put anything like too dense or too emotionally darker at the front, but I also wanted to make sure the beginning of the book, like the first 3 or 4 essays, set the tone for the rest of the book.
Mhm.
So while my intro tried to give an overview, like this is the kind of like, this is what I discovered putting these essays together. These are some conclusions I can draw about what it means to be queer and moving through the world. And then Andrew Ellis Evans' essay was the obvious first choice, and it just was like, okay, let's this is the whole world. And then not the whole world, but he has been around the whole world. And then I wanted to balance that out with something that went a little deeper psychologically, and then I wanted to give the reader a little breather. So I put
Yeah.
another, none of them are like light and fluffy, but some of them are easier reads than others. I was like balance and then balancing the identity of each writer, making sure that it was distributed in a way that makes sense, and just thinking about the reader experience and what would make you turn the page to the next essay.
Yeah. Yeah, tricky, like, working with so many different trying to make it flow and trying to see how it's gonna yeah, I can respect that you have to take it as, like, a story by story basis, and because yeah, I might be finished with one story, and then the next one, it's the previous one makes me wanna continue that, like, a totally different voice
It's not like
country.
a novel where you plant the conflict that needs to you need to turn the page in order to find out what happens with that conflict that's set up in the previous chapter. But I think I took a note from the first collection of travel essays by
Mm.
different authors were the Best American Travel Anthologies. That series launched in 2000. And so, those were had no idea
Oh,
what was going to come next. And
okay.
I think they probably did that to make their job easier since it was every single
Probably.
year. Every single year they had a different batch of essays, and maybe we should just make it uniform and alphabetical. But because it was alphabetical, it's absolutely random. So
Yeah.
having read a lot of these anthologies, I really liked that as well. I liked being surprised. Yeah, I tried to make each one a surprise compared to the one before.
Yeah. Hopping off of what you were saying earlier, that was the most challenging part to write was to try to structure them and figure out how they all fit together. or how they're gonna progress from beginning to end. What do you have any enjoyable moments or parts of the project that, that you just really loved?
Oh, I loved reading because you don't know what you're gonna get. You're like, "I
Yeah.
like your writing. Can you write me something?" And then
Yeah.
sure. So, Garrett Conley wrote an amazing piece about being a Peace Corps volunteer in Ukraine and having just dealt with all of this. He had a preacher father and was sent to conversion therapy,
Oh,
and he'd been finally reconciling that, and then he goes to Ukraine, and Peace Corps, by the way, you should probably go back in the closet for a while.
that was
Yeah.
wild.
And it was just such a beautiful essay. So it was really a joy to see what I would get and then to start thinking about them all together and, oh, that one goes with that one. And
Yeah.
yeah, so that was definitely very enjoyable.
That one definitely stood out to me as well because it was like these stories, snippets, right? Or essays or of you don't really know the context until you get further into the essay. But that one, it was like it was casually mentioned while he was
Mhm.
describing something. It was like, "Oh, when I left the conversion therapy facility and I left that life and blah blah blah." And I remember I took a small moment because I was like, "Oh shit, that's." I'm like, that's another heartbreaking thing that I'm never gonna have to experience, and it's so sad that people have to experience that from their own like what shit hand that you were dealt with in life, the deck of cards, if you will. Your father is the pastor and this is who you are. And it's one thing to be raised under a super strict reverent household, but to be like almost the antithesis of what they're hoping that you turn out to be, it's heartbreaking. And so that was like, and just like the casualness of him, not glossing over it, but just mentioning it while trying to explain something like it was
He
like,
did already write a
oh,
whole
so
book
this
about
is a
it.
yeah, I was gonna say this is just you. Oh yeah, I went through that, and this is what I'm dealing with. He's reflecting. He's reminded of that because this person that he met is perfect. Like you talked to your dad about this thing, like that.
Right.
And
He goes all the way to
absolutely not.
Ukraine to deal with another Baptist Christian.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, and then the fact that he couldn't it's one thing, like, I think a lot of us, straight or gay or whatever, almost anybody's felt that, like, insta lust or that insta attraction to someone who you're just trying to keep your cool, and you're trying to, like, not make it too obvious, not get too flustered around this person, and he's gotta do it for for a completely different reason where he's just not sure how Ukraine or he was advised that Ukrainians, like, just
Mhm.
don't share that part about
Right.
yourself, just don't and just, like, the questions that he had to dodge, like, stuff up, like
Yeah, like
like
yeah, the having a girlfriend, yeah.
yeah,
Though I have to
yeah,
say,
and
a lot of those things have come up for me as just a woman traveling alone. Like, I definitely have gotten,
oh, you gotta fabricate some
Do you have a
things just
boyfriend? What
to
does he look like? All these things. When is he coming to
yeah,
visit? Are you gonna get married? All this, I
yeah.
don't know. But and also the whole idea of having to be choosy about where you travel. Like, I as a woman who often travels alone, there are lots of
Mm,
places that I won't go. There are lots of places I will go under we'll figure out how to get proper safety in place. But yeah, a lot of that is like how do you negotiate safety,
yeah,
which is a huge issue for young travelers in general.
yeah, and with just the way, like, how global politics has, like, it's
Now it's
just
even
always
worse. I was recently named a Fulbright specialist, which means it's for sort of experts in a field to go into institutions that request their services. And so my expertise is creative writing pedagogy. So I was in the middle of planning a program at Kampumera, which is a publishing house in Cambodia. And I think I lost my funding, but I'm not sure. We'll see.
mm, you're just like, "Oh, I might have to check on that." Like, what
Yeah.
That's yeah, that's unfortunate. That's because it's I imagine that's just an exciting opportunity for you in
Yeah.
general, and
Yeah.
then
I'm gonna make it happen
yeah, there you
yeah,
yes.
I'll use my other funding from
Whether it's
school.
next year or 3 years from now, it's okay. Just keep trying. So I know we got a few minutes left, so just a couple more questions. So, what I'll throw this out to you. What advice do you have for maybe you could choose which mode of advice you wanna do. Maybe advice for LGBTQ writers, travel writers, or somebody who's aspiring to try to be a travel writer, or some even advice for someone who's trying to take on similar projects that you have?
Mhm. I think one of the things that when I teach travel writing comes up a lot is early stage travel writers often forget to put themselves in the piece
Mm,
because you approach it like, oh, I went to Guatemala and I have this essay to write, but it's about Guatemala. It's not about me. But the thing is, if you don't have a persona on the page, which is a version of yourself that relates to the subject matter, that's what allows the reader to connect with Guatemala. If the reader
mm.
can't connect with you, the person who's in Guatemala, they can't connect with the subject matter. So, how do you develop a persona? And also, I do this little exercise. I am a blank in blank, and I want blank. So that forces you to classify yourself as a persona, like I am an American traveler, or I am a queer American woman, or whatever it is. And then in gives you the location, the setting, and then and I want gives you a desire that drives the narrative forward. So it's a really simple exercise that always yields a travel essay. And it can be really small, like I am a tourist in Paris and I want to find a bathroom, or it can be like I am a student in a foreign university and I want to mend my broken heart. So it can be something more abstract. So I would recommend that. And I think with
I
in
think
terms
it
of
gives a
queer,
focus too. It's
what's
easy
that?
to focus once you have it's
Yeah,
easy to have a focus when you have that
when you know where you're
guideline.
going. So if you know what you
Yeah.
want, you know where you're going. Also because it's nonfiction, so you know how it turned out. But in terms of queer writing, I think it's really about finding that balance between not emphasizing your identity at the expense of the rest of your humanity. Like you want to be
Mm,
a human being that is not reduced to one part of yourself. So just looking for that, how do you best represent yourself in the context of the material? So it's funny, I've
yeah,
talked to Andrew a lot about how often we used to be told take out the reference to your partner, your same-sex partner, if it's not part of the story, because
sure.
that might eject a reader who is not here for the queer content. And I remember reading Ariel Levy's amazing essay called Thanksgiving in Mongolia, which was in the New Yorker, I think probably circa 2014, I want to say. I could be wrong about that date. But I read the whole essay and then I was talking to a friend and like, oh, this essay was amazing. And she was like, did you know that she's a lesbian? And I was like, no, like, why? It's about her being pregnant and she references her partner. And I was like, what? What? I was like, how come she didn't say that? And I thought to myself, I wonder if the New Yorker was like, don't just go around that part. And Andrew and I were talking about how often we had been not necessarily told to do that, but encouraged to do that. So
Yeah,
don't be
that's
afraid of that.
tricky. Yeah, yeah, or, like, maybe anticipate it a little bit and be a little
Anticipate it
prepared
and
for it.
know that you don't have to. Things have changed. Things have changed a
Yeah,
lot since I was starting out as a travel writer in terms of queer acceptance, but
yeah,
it's still an issue.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, I'm glad that times are different even if the struggle is still very much there, but I'm hoping the majority I don't know. We don't need to go off on a tangent, we don't have time for that. Like, Alden Jones, what is next for you? Are you working on anything that you could talk about?
Whew, I have 3 projects right now that I'm really trying to decide how to prioritize, but the thing that I've been working on for a while is a novel set in Cambodia and New England. And the impetus for the novel was I had been to Cambodia and I'd been thinking a lot about Cambodia and trying to figure out how to plan another trip. And I learned that the ancient sassafras tree was one of the many things in the Cardamom Mountain region of Cambodia, which is this huge, it's a supposedly protected forest, but the government is very corrupt in
Mm,
Cambodia, have sold a lot of land, and there have been a lot of land grabs, and it's been really devastating. But I learned that so the Khmer Rouge planted all this ordnance to keep people out of the forest because that's where they were hiding out in the 80s.
mm,
And because of that, things grew that didn't grow anywhere else in the world and protected the forest. So once the mines were cleared, then people started entering illegally for logging and poaching. And one of the things was the ancient sassafras tree, it's a huge tree that the illegal loggers would, this is in the late 2000s, would make little factories in the forest and distill the oil, which was sold to produce MDMA. It was saffron
Oh,
oil, the
wow.
precursor for MDMA. So I was like, oh, that's so crazy. I always thought MDMA was made in a lab and you don't really, it's like a love drug, it's happiness. And yet there's all this destruction behind it that I was completely unaware of. So that was like looking at ways that were connected across cultural lines that are
Yeah.
invisible, that we don't know about. And so I started researching different ways we were connected.
That's crazy. Yeah, and I imagine you're got Post-it notes, like, on a vision board, figure out make those connections and structure and make it be something that, like, yeah, wait a second, what? What?
Yeah. And it's the
That's
50th,
crazy.
50 years ago now. It was 1975 to 1979 that Khmer Rouge was ruling Cambodia. So I'm thinking a lot about it's 50 years. It's a 50-year.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
crazy.
such a crazy history that we should really know, and especially from the United States. Like we were in the rise of the Khmer Rouge because of the bombing campaign during the Vietnam
Yeah,
War. And still, people don't know anything about it. So I'm really
yeah.
hoping that this 50th anniversary will bring some awareness to the area.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely that would be really interesting. I definitely stay in that lane and look into that because that's some fascinating stuff. Real quick, where can we find you online and on social media?
I am I'm on everything on social media, usually Alden Jones Writer. I'm Alden Jones Writer on Instagram and Threads, and I think also Blue Sky, which is I still haven't figured out how to use. It's like I keep going, I'm like, this is I don't this seems really boring, but I guess I just haven't cracked it yet. And then
Like,
there's
I'm just gonna write something and post it and see
yeah.
what happens.
I'm like I spent some time trying to build an audience on Twitter and was like, God, this is like a job. I don't want to do this is too
It
much work. It's
is.
supposed to be
It
fun.
is.
So once I
Yeah,
saw
right.
Blue Sky was it seemed like it was going to be a lot of work. I was like, I don't know. So don't look for
Yeah.
me on Blue Sky if you want to actually interact with me. But I do have a website at aldenjones.com.
Perfect, perfect. All right, Alden Jones, Edge of the World. That book is available on May 6th. Thank you so much for joining me
Thank
today.
you.
I felt without a constraint for time, I felt like we could have gone on all these rabbit
Yeah, we
holes.
had so much
Super
more to discuss.
fun things to talk about, fascinating things to talk about. And if and when you have your next project out in the world, feel free to come back. Love to chat about it again.
Great. I will. Thank you
Perfect.
so much.
Absolutely. I'll let you get. And there you go. That was Alden Jones talking about her collection of short stories, essays, Edge of the World. That book is available now. Check out the show notes where you can find links to purchase the book and where to find Alden online and on social media. While you're searching online and on social media, please also find Cantina Book Club. Rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you need book recommendations, go to cantinabookclub.com. And there's all sorts of genres out there that I write about. And as always, thank you so much for listening.